Hey everybody, Greg Pruitt here with Gun News Now. And before I introduce my special guest and good friend, please be sure to subscribe to the channel and go check out all the news articles that we have on Gun News Now. In particular, I love putting up the self-defense articles where gun owners use their firearms in self-defense to defend themselves or other individuals. And there are thousands and thousands of these stories that just never get told by the mainstream media, or the gun control groups do very little to ever shine light on how good firearms can be when used properly and when used in self-defense. So be sure to check those out. All right, with that, I've got a very busy special guest, so I want to give her a chance to chime in. Today, we're going to be talking about the NFA and all of the things that are happening with the NFA, because it is absolute chaos right now. And with that, a good friend of mine, Alexandria Kincaid, she is an attorney. She's done a ton of work for the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance, which I also run. And you've just been an incredible asset to gun owners, especially in, I'll call you up every now and then and say, hey, I need some advice legally on, can we do this? Can we not do this? How would this work? And you've just been fantastic. So thank you for everything that you do for gun owners, not just in Idaho, but you've got an incredible book called Infringed, which everybody should read. An absolute necessity to understand how dangerous of a situation we all are all in legally as gun owners all the time because of these gun control laws. But I appreciate your time. So first, if you want to kind of introduce yourself a little bit, and then let's get right into the NFA and the total chaos that is happening right now with the NFA.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I kind of smirked when you said Infringed because I wrote that book in 2015. My goodness, have things changed? It's
right.
A completely different world. And at the time I wrote the book, I was explaining to gun owners what the NFA was and the dichotomy we have between federal law and state laws. And since then, look at all the states that have banned suppressors and short barrel rifles and so-called assault weapons. Things have changed drastically in the last decade. It's just been incredible. So as you said, I'm a lawyer. I have focused heavily on supporting the Second Amendment. I am proud to have known you and the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance since you first brought me the draft or we ran into each other rather, right? Constitutional carry. What a project. And it's been a great relationship. So thanks for talking to me today. I think I mentioned to you before you started recording that I had written an article also for Recoil magazine back in 2017 about the origins of the NFA. And it's interesting that at the time this law was being proposed, it was an end run around the Constitution. It was a way to create a federal gun registry when one otherwise would not have been deemed to be constitutional. And so now it's been unraveled because of this act of Congress in removing the tax. And now we find ourselves with a registry that is not based on anything for some of those firearms. So what are your thoughts?
Do you think that was the purpose? Sorry to cut you off there. Do you think that was the purpose of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act? In fact, I had a reporter ask me this today, is the reason that this is happening is because they zeroed out the tax? Do you think that was the plan all along? And I said, well, yeah, because GOA filed their lawsuit right after that bill was signed into law, when it zeroed out the tax. And you wrote a great op-ed, by the way, talking about a lot of this, and we'll link that in the comments and the description. But you talked about how the judge didn't rule on the constitutionality of this whole NFA fight. He talked about how the tax worked, and without the tax, Congress had no authority. Is that correct?
That's correct. And one of the points that I made in that article is, if you think about Al Capone and what was going on during Prohibition, they couldn't capture him on the murders. He went to prison because of tax evasion. So this is an interesting law, the National Firearms Act, enacted in 1934, that is essentially a criminal law that is a tax law. And if you don't have a tax, why have a registration? All of this paperwork that gun owners have had to endure for the pleasure of purchasing something that once was sold at hardware stores in America has been unraveled because of that one act of Congress now taking away the tax, which served as the foundation to do an end run around our Second Amendment.
Yeah. Well, and I guess on that point, can you briefly explain to people, especially gun owners, because I know you and I have talked offline, you're getting tons of messages about what happened. Does it apply to me? Does it not apply to me? Who does it apply to? What if I live in a blue state like California or Washington? Can I, and I'm a GOA member that lives in that state. What does that mean? Can you kind of talk about what you've been telling gun owners since this came out?
Join GOA. If you are not a GOA member. So the injunction is pretty specific about plaintiffs. And one of the areas where we're having a lot of questions is because certain states like Idaho were plaintiffs in one of these lawsuits. And there were multiple lawsuits that were joined together that formed the basis for this decision. And just because you live in Idaho, it's not really clear what you can and can't do. I think the federal government will be hard pressed to enforce these rules against someone, but on the other hand, do you really want to be the test case for that? And err on the side of caution. So what is clear is that the members of certain organizations, and interestingly, the future members of the organizational plaintiffs are included as protected from the mandates of the National Firearms Act registration program that was, pretty much written by bureaucrats who came up with all the regulations that tell us how to implement that law. So Form 4, Form 1, having your photograph and fingerprints taken. We used to be able to get around that with gun trusts, and then they nabbed that from us back in 2016 with Rule, I think it was 41F. We couldn't get around certain things when we used a gun trust anymore. That went out the window, and I'm sure a lot of your viewers remember that and know what I'm talking about. But the organizations seem to be very clearly protected by this injunction. And if you're a member of the Gun Owners of America and you live in Idaho, where we don't prohibit you from having certain types of firearms, you should be able to purchase a suppressor without that extra paperwork. And I'm understanding that Silencer Co. has jumped right on board and is doing this because they were a plaintiff in these lawsuits. But if you live in a state like California or even Washington, where you have state laws that restrict your ability to possess certain firearms, this law has no effect on that. So this is a ruling by a federal court about a federal law. And if you live in one of these communist type states where you can't exercise your freedom to arm yourself, you're stuck. You're going to be in jail or prison for violating your state's law. So it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily comply with the NFA if you're a member of Gun Owners of America and you live in California, but your California state law is going to restrict your ability to lawfully possess those items anyways. So you can't get around that.
Yeah. So you're saying that if you do live in one of the 15 states that are red states that join this, then the best thing to do is the whole future thing threw me off too. I'm like, wait, what? Right. Like, all the future ones?
Well, let's just talk about what the right thing to do here is. The right thing to do. I don't know if you've seen the government do the right thing very often, but the right thing to do would be to say, hey, you know what? This law doesn't make any sense anyways. It doesn't make any sense for modern day Americans and for law-abiding citizens whose backgrounds can easily be checked on a 4473 when you buy any other kind of firearm. Why are we applying different rules to certain firearms? And why are we creating this registry, which is really unconstitutional? There
was some interesting discussion I've seen, on Second Amendment boards and online and stuff. Some people, gun owners, wanted the DOJ to appeal. They wanted them to fight, and not because they didn't want the NFA to go away, but because if you live in a blue state, you're almost wanting this to keep moving up the chain, right? You want it to eventually end up at the U.S. Supreme Court, where they can hopefully just gut the entire thing for everyone. That was the argument, and I guess I can sort of understand that, but this in the political world, I'm like, no, you take huge victories like this when you can get them, and just start another lawsuit in California that says, hey, we're being treated unequally because of X, Y, and Z. and then you start the process there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and you probably ought to interview a California lawyer about their ability to fight that in California, because
Right.
I don't know the odds of winning that. And again, the focus on this particular lawsuit is very specific. Again, it's not a Second Amendment case. It is a case that challenged a federal gun registry and excess paperwork that we've been enduring all these years that was based upon a tax. The tax has been eliminated. So what's the purpose of the paperwork and the registry? There isn't one. And that's what the court said. There isn't one. You can't do this. So, getting into the depths of a state's laws is an entirely different analysis. I don't think appealing this case and wanting this case to be appealed is necessarily a good idea. I think the DOJ is going to have to act. We're just seeing the wheels of justice turn very slowly here, which is typical.
Right.
I know I started to say earlier was the right thing for DOJ to do is to come out and say, look, we agreed with this court's analysis. We're not appealing, and we're not going to just apply the correct law to a select group of individuals. We're going to apply this across the country so that the NFA is effectively abolished with respect to silencers, short barrel rifles, and short barrel shotguns. Doesn't exist anymore. Now, people need to keep in mind that there are certain firearms that are still subject to those regulations, because this case did not overturn the National Firearms Act, which is what people keep asking me, right? It's not overturned. Yeah. There are machine guns, there are destructive devices, and my recollection is there are any other weapons that are still subject to some of those rules. So you can't, if you have fully automatic firearms, you're still going to have to fill out a Form 4 if you transfer it, or if you want to make one, you're going to have to fill out Form 1. You're going to have to comply, because we have not successfully eliminated the National Firearms Act. We've just put a nice big dent in it. Hopefully.
Yeah, a really big one, which is fantastic news. Again, I think it's still catching me off guard, and I think it caught almost everybody off guard.
It didn't catch me off guard. I said from day one, as soon as the Big Beautiful Bill Act passed, and I saw that lawsuit come from Gun Owners America, I went, they're absolutely right. There's absolutely no foundation for this paperwork anymore.
Well, no, I guess what I was caught off guard by was how low of a court we were dealing with. I thought it would eventually go higher and higher and higher. The fact that the DOJ and from what I've heard, that Trump was under a ton of pressure, not only from the gun groups, but also from Republican congressmen, where it was like, hey, this is our chance, don't appeal. Because the Trump admin has been really weird with what they're appealing and what they're not appealing on these. I know it's not a gun case, but I'm just saying gun cases, right? So nobody seems to know where he's going to do on what he's going to do on this stuff. All of a sudden, it was like, yeah, we're good, and everybody's like, wait, we're good, we're good, So it's that's what I meant by I think a lot of people got caught off guard with how low of a court opinion this was about, but I don't know.
Well, maybe. And I think there's a lot of mixed feelings on, or misunderstandings on what court. I heard somebody say Texas did X, Y, and Z yesterday, and I went, it's not Texas.
Yeah.
That wasn't Texas. It was a federal court.
Yeah.
But, I think there's still a lot of work to be done, and DOJ has not exhausted the appeal period. There was a limited time to appeal that specific injunction. But my understanding is the ordinary appeal limitations still apply. So we could still see something come.
Correct. Yeah. And as you know, like in politics, people say, I've heard rumors, but I know people who talk to the ATF regularly, and that there is allegedly an internal fight by the bureaucrats within the ATF to maintain the NFA as it's been for 90 years, and they want that all to continue. They want to keep it, and that whether that's true or not true, it wouldn't surprise me, right? Because bureaucrats are going to bureaucrat, and like you said, the government rarely does something good. You're talking about an agency that is notorious for making up rules, changing the rules whenever they want, and just screwing gun owners in the process. And so to me, it's like, okay, once this is really finalized, I'll feel a lot more comfortable, about the situation we're in.
And that's why everybody's really hoping for some direction and a statement of some kind. We're not going to pursue this. We're going to apply it across the board. We agree there is no foundation for a registry without the tax. Why hasn't that come out yet? Are they going to still file some kind of an appeal? It may still be coming.
Yeah. And that could be the government just moves at a snail's pace, it seems like, most of the time. But you would have thought by now they would have prepped for this day. You know what I mean? And that's what's a little bit concerning, is that there wasn't almost the next day or, a couple days later, some sort of guidance right away from the Trump administration on, that happened. We're going to have a full release of guidance on X date. And that way they could kind of put a lot of gun owners at ease, and especially the gun shops, who are, I'm sure, or I know because I've talked to some of the owners, that are just flooded with people asking these same questions. And these guys that's a lot of risk for a gun shop, right? Because you're complying with what you believe is lawful, based on what happened. Do you roll the dice? I don't know.
It's not a great position to be in, because on the one hand, you have a customer saying, hey, I'm a member of GO, I'm protected, I live in the state of Idaho, please give me that suppressor that I purchased months ago and it's sitting behind the counter and you don't have the form back yet. What's the gun store going to do? I don't know what response you've gotten from most of them, but it's a difficult place to be, because they're having to sort out who is protected by this particular injunction, or are they going to get in any trouble? This is their livelihood. This is their license. I would say probably not, if they can prove that each person that they give the item to is in fact protected by the injunction. But I sure as heck wouldn't want to hang my hat on that at this point, because I am cautious by nature and I try to protect my clients. So I think everybody needs to use a little bit of caution, and, as hard as it is, wait and see what happens next. At least wait for the appeals period to run. Yeah.
I guess the last thing I want to ask you, and then if you have anything to add, that's fine too. What are your thoughts on, so I remember when they were debating this bill, they were talking about zeroing out the tax, and there was some concern, I guess, on some level, that if the Democrats, let's say in the midterms, they just sweep and they get the Senate, they get the House, the House, and then, in a couple of years, they've got the trifecta. Okay. So the Democrats have a trifecta, and we know that they won't hesitate to just come after gun owners. That's what they do. What if can they bring the tax back? And what if they bring it back at $1,000? And I mean, so do you think that if that's possible, or are we going to see a mass rush on SBRs and SBSs and suppressors over the next 2 years, because that's a possibility that the tax can be brought back through Congress at a much higher rate that people can't even afford at that point?
Well, I mean, tax laws can change, right?
Yeah.
I do a lot of estate work, and it's a constant keeping up on the new laws, or it has been over the last decade, and how things have changed dramatically since I've been practicing estate law, from a $300,000 exemption amount that you can pass to your heirs all the way up to what we now have at $15 million. So laws can change. That's what people need to keep in mind. It's probably a great time to have a gun store.
Yeah. Well, I know that's
remember when we had that assault weapons ban and you couldn't buy, there was a period of time, gosh, this seems like so long ago, but there was a period of time when you couldn't buy AR-15s.
Yeah.
It was for law enforcement use only. In fact, I have one of these. It's stamped law enforcement use only. It's just a regular semi-auto AR-15.
That's crazy.
Right? You remember that?
Yeah. Well, didn't the ban, I think the ban, golly, I'm trying to remember. I think George W. let it go. If I remember, that's when it got.
But they probably implemented, is my point.
Correct.
Right? Buying. Oh my gosh, we can have these in, and then they tried to implement it. And I believe that was from the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably after Sandy Hook, I think.
A lot of statistics that it did absolutely nothing to deter crime.
Correct.
Just pointless gun control.
Yeah, 100%. Well, as you know, the most most crime is done with a handgun. so if you're going to
Hammer. Hammer and a baseball bat.
Right. Yeah. No kidding. Well, I know you're busy. I know you got stuff to do. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything in closing you'd like to say to gun owners about the NFA or anything else? And if they want to get your book infringed, where can they get that?
You can get it at my office. You can get it at Amazon. And there's a few chapters on my website. So it's,
okay.
But in closing, I would just say, hang in there. We haven't seen the end of this yet, and hopefully it's a positive outcome. So let's just keep the pressure on, keep the fight.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your insight. We really appreciate it. We'll have to have you on much more frequently because you have so much free time as an attorney, I know.
Practicing firearms law and, everything else I do, just it's never-ending saga. So thank you, Greg. It's good to see you again. It's been a long time since we've done a video. So most people probably remember me as a blonde. And I think it was Biden and my hair went brown. And it's been a while.
It's been a bit. Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Well, I'd love to have you back on in the future and maybe to talk about restoration of rights. I know there's some stuff that in the news today. So maybe we'll catch up soon and you can talk about restoration of rights and what gun owners should know if they've been in trouble before and all that kind of stuff. I think that would be a great video for people. So
sure.
Anyway, okay.
Big area of my practice. All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys for watching. Well, thank you, Alexandria, for coming on, and be sure to subscribe and like and share and all that fun stuff. Until next time, take care. God bless.